Now, Blood and Ink is the story of a 16-year-old radicalised young man who falls in love with a 15-year-old girl from Timbuktu. It's set against the backdrop of the 2012 Al-Qaeda takeover of the city. It's an adventure story about the smuggling of ancient manuscripts out of Timbuktu. The story of Khadija and Ali was written by children's author Stephen Davies, who I'm pleased to say joins me now. Very good morning to you, Stephen.
Good morning.
With what's going on with Al-Qaeda and Islamic State and Boko Haram and, like, the book couldn't be more timely, but let's face it, it doesn't sound like it makes riveting reading for kids.
It's a very difficult subject for kids. Yeah, that's right. And it's quite a frightening subject, not just for kids, but for adults as well. But I think radical Islam is such a massive issue in the world today, and some would say the massive issue in the world today, that it's only right that young adult authors should be tackling it.
What sort of age group is this targeted at? Because it's sort of quite a hefty book. It's a proper novel.
Yes, I would say certainly 12 plus. So it's certainly a secondary read. You know, I wouldn't want it in primary schools necessarily. But yes, I mean it is a big issue, and you know I feel sorry for secondary school teachers because they're being sort of charged on top of their already big workload with, you know, dealing with the whole subject of radicalisation as well.
Is this a love story that just happens to have this as a backdrop, or is the actual relationship with Al-Qaeda really at the heart of the story too?
I would say both, really. I mean, the issues to do with radicalisation are very much at the heart of the story, because I don't think you can write about Timbuktu in that era without taking those things seriously and taking those two opposing viewpoints seriously. But I don't write to sort of educate young people about Africa. I write primarily to entertain, and it is a love story.
People that are 12 plus would actually learn something from this historically, and it's relevant to what's going on right now.
Absolutely, yes. And I'm quite gratified that, you know, people, you know, early reviews are saying I don't usually read this sort of thing, or, you know, outside my sort of cultural or geographical comfort zone, but I've picked this up and enjoyed it.
Now, you subscribe to the view that you should kind of write about what you know, and this is obviously an African-based story. You lived in Africa for a long time, so that's what inspired you to sort of write this sort of book.
Yes, that's right, absolutely. I lived in Africa for going on 13 years, moved out there in 2001, and just came back last July. So
what was the inspiration for kind of writing that story? There are thousands of stories you could write about Africa.
It was very topical. I felt that the subject needed treatment. You know, it just seems that this year is the time for Timbuktu to tell its story. Of course, it's coincided as well with that wonderful film Timbuktu by Sissako, which has come out in London literally, you know, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And yeah, I think it's an important story, and I'm passionate about diversity in general in children's books. I think it's important.
I was going to pick you up on that,
right.
But do you think a lot of African books could, dealing with this as a topic, make the continent seem a bit doom and gloom? There's enough going on the continent to sort of be a bit pessimistic about.
Yes, and I think that's the stereotype already, you know, so you, in a sense you can't make that worse. But you know, it's a bit of a cliche, but I think on the darkest of nights, you know, that's when the stars shine the brightest, and there is a lot of, hopefully, you know, wit and wisdom and positivity and humour in the book against that backdrop.
I'm not even going to ask you whether Ali does successfully sort of draw Khadija away from Al-Qaeda, because that would spoil it. But are you aware of the sort of impact that your writing has on kids?
I hope it has a positive impact. I do a lot of work in schools, and I enjoy going into schools. And you know, we talk about the nuts and bolts of storytelling, but we also, you know, learn to tie a turban, Timbuktu style, and carry calabashes on our heads, and learn, you know, West African greetings. So I hope that it does portray Africa not as a place of doom and gloom, but as a place of joy and adventure.
You've already mentioned it, but this sort of need for diverse books within in children's reading. Why do you think it's so important?
Well, children of colour need to see themselves on the bookshelves in their libraries and in their schools. Muslim children need to see themselves not as the sidekick, but as the main character. And if they don't, then they start to think that the books simply aren't for them. So it's very important, and I think there's been some major strides actually just in the last 6 months or so in getting more diverse books onto the shelves.
Would you say that a book like this is targeted at, say, a UK or a European audience, or would it have the same kind of impact in Africa, that people would kind of pick that up and reflect on it?
I would love it to be translated into French and read in Africa. You know, I think the themes in it are universal enough to be read anywhere. You know, it's not just about the narrow phenomenon of Islamic radicalization, but about, you know, the brotherhood of man in a more general way.
Why did you make that leap from writing what your job, if you like, in Africa was doing travel pieces and travelogues and writing more factual stuff? Why make that leap into novel writing? Well, and kids, for that matter.
Well, the day job actually was as a missionary. You know, I went over there as a Christian missionary in 2001, and writing at that time was very much a hobby. It was just something that I did in the evenings to relax and to sort of process my own thoughts about Africa. So
it was a way out.
It was getting it all out. Yes, that's right. Yes.
Well, very best of luck with that. It's launched already in the bookshop, so hopefully everybody will be able to pick it up. And it's published by Anderson Press. Blood and Ink by Stephen Davies.
Thank you. Yes.
Many thanks for coming in, joining us on this day live.
Thank you, James.